Primary Tourist, Chapter 12. All in all, March and April of 2008, the carnival was the last thing on my mind. It's funny how your whole reality can just turn on a dime. Same thing with my stroke. Wow, to think for years I took walking for granted. And I always figured my nieces and nephews would outlive me. I figured those things were givens. Take nothing for granted, it'll come back to bite you in the ass every time. That whole time, the Rhode Island hospital time, late March 2008, I don't like to think about that time at all. Nick was in serious pain all the time, which made him want his medicine more. And since his medicine was morphine, there were strict limits. They gave him these things called pops instead, and he was sucking them down, but it was doing nothing. And you could see the little kid running away, still in there. Nick was one of a kind, right from the very beginning, a real charmer. And he knew it, too, like the time Joe Montana gave him a photo of him with a football that said, "With warm regards, Joe Montana." So Nick gives him a photo that says, "With warm regards, Nick Marini." I'm not even sure that's the real story, but isn't that what oral history is all about? But anyway, at this point, he was in too much pain to be charming. "Here's your pop," the nurse said, pretending to be helpful. I don't know, maybe not pretending, unless of course to herself, and who hasn't done that? "Fuck the pop." That's probably the nicest thing he said, so we'll just go with that. And who am I to say he should have acted different, more, polite? I'll tell you one thing, the shit that burns my ass more than anything else these days is anything that can be helped, that's harder than it has to be. That shit just makes me crazy. And the way Nick looked at it, offering pops instead of real pain relief, that could be helped. I'd be pissed too. I noticed something about myself lately. I can be nice, but something makes me mad. I reach this boiling point and then watch out. Thinking back on it, I probably would have been worse. A lot worse. Just ask some of the staff in this hellhole. They know. When the chemo started, it seemed like he was always suffering, wouldn't really recover until the weekend when he had 2 full days off. I remember coming in to visit on Easter Sunday, and he was out of bed getting a massage, and he seemed like the old Nick. The massage and the time off of the chemo was just what the doctor ordered for Nick's mood, and I think we all allowed ourselves to be hopeful. I mean, underneath it all, we all had the same fears, but maybe the chemo could zap it. We were all feeling that, trying hard to believe it, almost convincing ourselves that we did. When you think about it, sir, we're all alive until we aren't. That day, we all felt that Nick was alive, and lots of family and friends were there at different times. And I know it sounds crazy, but that fact alone made it a little bit of a party, and Nick was the host. Some people are really good at it, at knowing people don't know how to act, so acting like it's a celebration. And there this kid was, dying. We all knew it was just a matter of time, so we all came to make him feel better. And you know what? He made us feel better. That was Nick. Anyway, that was the best day at the hospital, because the next day he got too nauseous to take the chemo, and he didn't want to go through it anyway. Without the chemo, well, making him as comfortable as possible became the priority. Almost immediately, the talk started to be of hospice. I'm going to tell you something right now, sir, but if you have any funny feelings about talking about hospice, because of the subject matter, well, don't. Because once you've gotten over that one little fact that I said before, the one, we're all alive until we aren't. Once you come to grips with that, you can live together for a little while, and then the magic of the hospice workers take over. The huge gift they give to the family as well as the patient. God love them. I couldn't do it. I mean, it's bad enough when the patient is 97 years old, but how about when he was Nick, 32 years old? Then again, Nick made it a celebration. A worse than sad celebration, but a celebration still. We were missing that even as we were receiving it. The other thing about hospice in this case was it was right down the block from where I was living, if you want to call that living. Man, what a dump. Hospice gave me a place to go, a reason to be on days when I wasn't working. Renewal time was coming up at the theater, and there was a certain craziness about every year, an evil mixture of profit and stress that feeds on itself. Without going into detail, the key to my finances for the whole spring came down to making calls and putting hours in right now. But I knew myself well enough to know that after 3.5 shifts, I start losing it, and I need to do something else for a long weekend. It particularly sucked because it normally came at a time when I'd rather be enjoying the most beautiful part of the spring. That year, well, it all was on a different level that year. Like the days going by were that much more precious. We had to be careful not to wish one away. It's a good thing that renewals were like shooting fish in a barrel, because I was kind of sleepwalking that year. During the peak of renewals, sales just seem to find you. All you have to do is pick up a phone and make as many calls as you can and hope that the phone doesn't bring a time-consuming pain-in-the-ass call that doesn't put any money in your pocket and keeps you away from the blue-chip calls. Money for the taking, but the clock is ticking away. Pressure. At least it seemed that way until the weekend. Nick was under far more pressure every minute of every day, and he didn't show it, not one bit. The strangest thing is that once Nick got his medication, his appetite came back, and he had his sisters going all over the state to his favorite restaurants, so there was always good food around. And really, when there is food, there is to some extent a party. You see, sir, I'm Italian, and food, Jesus, it's even more of a key to a party than the vino, and that's saying something. And we all need food to live, and eating means you're still alive, not dead just yet. Maybe that's why we loved seeing Nick eat and enjoy eating as much as we did. Alive and part of a family, and looking back, even as a kid, once he figured out where he was and how to speak the language, knowing where he fit in a family was really important to him. I remember when he was a kid and his whole family came over for Sunday lunch at Nona's. So, since I was between jobs, I was living at home for an extra decade or two, so I was in charge of getting the table set. The girls helped Nona grate the cheese, and the boys had to get the extra table and the cobagnon, which is Fornelli dialect for shed. Maybe I'm misreading stuff after the fact, but it seemed really important to him to bring in the table the whole family was going to eat on. Who knows? Maybe he just wanted to make sure he got his share of world-class meatballs, but I don't think so. I always thought that because he knew what it was like to not have a family, he really appreciated everything about having one. No such thing as a meaningless ritual. Every trip to the Cobagnon a gift, and now they're gone. I wouldn't mind a trip to the Cobagnon one last time myself. Then about 6 meatballs. Jesus, just to be able to walk there, but it's gone. My walking, my Cobagnon, my meatballs, my mother, my father, Nick, too young gone. But while he was still here, damn it, he was going to eat well. So the variety of foods there was pretty mind-boggling. I mean, Nick really ran his sisters ragged, going to restaurants all over the state, starting with breakfast. No time was too early to call a sister and make a request for breakfast. Well, to be honest, request is too weak a word. They weren't quite orders, but they weren't quite not orders either. Where are you? At 6 o'clock in the morning, the answer was usually predictable. Where do you think I am? You getting my breakfast yet? I'm waking up. Mom and Dad are going to look after Maria. What do you want? He wanted some particular home fries from his favorite restaurant, which wasn't on the way to hospice even a little bit. It'll be at least 7 by the time I can get there. Hurry up, Julia. But I knew that everything took time, and he knew how lucky he was to have his sisters. No one else would look at his circumstance and call it lucky. But I never heard him complain. I remember one time him saying, I can't believe I can't move my right side. But it was more out of amazement than anything else. I understand how that works. Like now, sometimes I forget I can't just get up and fucking walk. I know it sounds crazy, but honest, I just forget. Ain't that something? I think we just want to remember the good, all that good stuff that we took for granted, that we thought would go on forever and last forever. It's gone now. By 6 o'clock any Friday morning, I had already made my way to the coffee exchange, hanging around waiting for my friend to get there for morning chess. I was having my coffee and eating my fruit and yogurt, soaking in the early morning rays in a low-key, socializing, pre-chess kind of way. Chess normally was what I called intense, but I knew better this time around. What Nick was going through, that was intense. What I'm going through now, you bet your ass this qualifies. Chess? A game. A great game, yes. The best even. But still just a game. How intense can that be? In retrospect, the intense part was being there at all, having the privilege of soaking it all in. I don't recollect who won a single game that day, and we played several, but the way the sun felt, I'll never forget. Until it's my turn to go, and who knows when that is. Not when we expect it, that's for sure. When we finished with our chess, my friend gave me a ride to hospice. I got there around noon, just in time for lunch. There were steak sandwiches, some chicken, some pad thai, all specialties of different restaurants that were picked up by one of the sisters or my brother or my sister-in-law. Everybody either had understanding bosses or worked for themselves, and there you have it. One of those rare times when everyone knew an ending was coming, but no one knew exactly when, so each moment had to be savored. We all knew we weren't going to be walking this ground again, thank God, so we better get it right. I think we even had kimchi there, and that was pretty much totally for Nick because, well, kimchi was an acquired taste. Nick had acquired it way back when he was a kid back in Korea, before his ocean travels. It was everywhere in Korea. To think, it was just a few weeks before he came here that he was halfway around the globe in another world altogether, when you think about it. Time and space, man. Sometimes they move at different speeds. It confuses me every now and then, I'll admit it. It confused Bill and Diane, too, thinking they were in one world when actually they were in another. Like the choo-choo bars. I told you about the choo-choo bars, right? No? Well, shortly after Nick got here, the whole family, Nick, his two sisters, and one brother, his mom and his dad, went to check out the ships over in Fall River, and everybody had a great time. Till the end of the day, on the ride home, Nick started screaming choo-choo-ba over and over, getting louder every step of the way. If any of the other kids were screaming, at least you could understand them, but nobody spoke Korean except for Nick. The Korean English dictionary came out. Nothing for choo-choo-ba, and the screams got only louder, especially when they passed an ice cream stand as he pointed to it and screamed, choo-choo-ba! Aha, thought the parents. We'll get him ice cream. Choo-choo-ba! Even louder as they gave him an ice cream cone. They never did figure out what choo-choo-ba meant. For months. That was when my brother and sister-in-law were in New York City on a business trip, and they passed an ice cream stand with an advertisement for choo-choo bars, a chocolate-covered ice cream bar. The answer wasn't in any phrase book. They thought their son was living in the past, thousands of miles past. But he was in the here and now. And here and now, English was his language. Korean was in the past. And maybe in the future. Not here, not now. And here and now was lunchtime at hospice. It was informal, food and paper plates and napkins all about. Help yourself to it all. It kind of worked out for me because it was time for a meal. And here was food a world above what I was recently used to. Hey, Spike, where were you this morning? Nick asked. At the coffee exchange, playing chess. Isn't that kind of boring? I don't remember who said that. There were a lot of people there, including a few I didn't know. No way, chess is fun, Nick said. Yeah, didn't you beat him? My niece was asking if Nick had beaten me in chess. Which he hadn't, but out of everybody in the family, he gave me the best game. No, but I gave him a game. That's right. Best in the family. Hey, is there a set around here? We don't even have one at home, Nick said. He would never go back home. Hospice was his home now. And considering the circumstances, it was a beautiful home. We'll get one for over here, Diane said. And they did within a day or two, and we played a couple of games. That was the first and only time that I saw what a toll cancer was taking on Nick's senses, especially eyesight and spatial relations. The first game, he was moving the pieces wrong, but he was always patient as I explained what spaces a knight can move to from a certain spot, and I knew he knew what I was saying already, and he never seemed to make the same mistake twice. The first game I won easily, but the second game was much more competitive, but tired Nick right out. We tried one more, but his brain was fried. He said we'd play again soon, but we never did. I was hoping he'd beat me, and then beat cancer. But cancer, man, cancer always wins in the end. Hey, do you think the same thing is true of a stroke? Does a stroke always win? Am I just royally hosed? I don't know. I hear every stroke is different. You never know about your own. Only way to tell what time will do is to spend the time. By that time, you'll know your stroke a little better. Trust me, this is a long-term relationship. No one-night stand. It's part of me now. Meanwhile, while McCain galloped away with the nomination on the Republican side, a Donnybrook was going on between Obama and Clinton, and there were cries of, "The sky is falling, damn, all this squabbling between Hillary and Barack will elect John McCain, the end is near." See, sometimes doomsayers are just full of it. Maybe that's what the medical naysayers word will amount to, a hill of beans. Cancer? A tough one, but Nick can beat it. My head never bought into the whole magical thinking line of thought, but my heart was all in. But no, sometimes doomsayers are right, damn them. Just because it's right doesn't mean I want to hear it. Give me that carnival talk to fill my head with something I, in another time, would deem as important. But now it's just something to keep my mind off of the passage of time. The only thing about the carnival that seemed remotely important to me was the search for the great white. But any story I could tell seemed trite next to the one I saw playing out before me. And that story was too raw to tell, and it seemed like I would be intruding telling it anyway. All I could do is mark every day as a victory, knowing one day soon wouldn't seem like a victory at all. But now I know even that day was a victory, because now, sir, I'm still kicking. Not literally, can't kick these days, but I'm still here, even in this God-forsaken place, and that's something. I'm not dead yet. That might not be much, but it's all I got. Sorry, but that's all I got for today. Same time Thursday? Primary Tourist, Chapter 13. You know, it was just about a year ago that I was up north for the carnival, and goddamn it, why didn't I know just how fucking lucky I was? I mean, the new location had its drawbacks as far as accessibility. It was nowhere near downtown. And remember, I had no wheels. I had my feet, though, and Jesus, wasn't that something? Heaven, that's where I was, I'm telling you, and I didn't even know it. I had to get up real fucking early and make a run, well, a hearty walk, to make the bus, but I made it with 10 minutes to spare on a beautiful January day, the last Saturday before the primary, in gorgeous New Hampshire. What beats that? While waiting for the bus from Boscawen to downtown Concord, I grabbed a Concord Monitor. It told quite a tale about my old buddy Rick Santorum and how he was constantly being reminded that he wasn't in Iowa anymore. First off, his advance team kind of let him down. They underestimated the size of the crowd, so the indoor event became an outdoor event with hundreds coming to see Santorum, but not all of them were friendly. Not by a long shot. Like, for instance, the long-haired man who yelled out, "I'm a polygamist and I got 2 girls. Are you jealous, Rick?" No, he was not a friend. Lots of gay rights activists and occupiers were not Rick's friends either. And, in his very own category, was Vermin Supreme. While Santorum was still in the hall, Vermin, megaphone in hand and boot on head, was playing to the crowd. "Will you marry me, Rick? Come out with your hands up and your pants down." According to the monitor, the heckling went on for the next 45 minutes. Santorum kind of shrugged it off. I represented a district that had more steel workers in it than any other district in America. This is cake. Kept a stiff upper lip and all that bullshit, but it was hard to see him winning many votes in New Hampshire. He couldn't wait for Tuesday. Hopefully the fireworks weren't all lit. There's a few left for today's event, but you never know with the carnival. Lots of times, for lots of candidates, it ends early, all of a sudden. And of course, maybe fireworks was exactly what Santorum's campaign didn't need. Then again, in the Republican field, the crazier the better, maybe. The scary thing is, if you take away Huntsman, the crazy vote was the most sought-after segment of the vote. You might say, how about Romney? Don't kid yourself. He'll take any vote he can get, sane or crazy. In fact, a key question that helps form Romney's calculation seemed to be, are there more sane Republicans or insane Republicans among the likely primary voters? I don't know about you, but even now I'm not sure, and that very fact I find really scary. One of the two major parties is certainly beholden to the don't have a firm grasp on reality camp. That can't be a good thing for the country. Meanwhile, the bus driver had a running dialogue going on with himself. He didn't seem to care if you weren't listening to him, not much anyway. Besides, silence just gives him an excuse to break out in song, as if he needed an excuse. I wondered, is the bus driver a likely voter in the Republican primary? At least he could carry a tune. Now, one more bus ride to the oh-so-temporary center of the political universe. Oh-so-temporary, but also oh-so-now. Well, then. Now, not so much. When I finally got to Manchester, I still had to figure out how to get to St. Anselm's College. Or just grab a cab and let him figure it out. It ain't exactly free, but that's life in the big city. And I thought I had time considerations, not knowing that the Santorum event was going to go off way late. So once I gave the cabbie an obscene amount of money, I was way early. While waiting for the event, there was free food. I remember there was kiwi, and that's about all I remember. When I was younger, kiwi was really exotic. I was in my 20s before I ever saw it, so I guess it always qualified as the good stuff. And it was free stuff. No fruit as tasty as free fruit. The event itself was pretty much what I wasn't interested in seeing. Santorum was appealing to the whole Catholic angle, or trying to is more like it. Nice and dull and safe, and damn it, I can beat President Obama. But let's just talk rationally here. Don't gang up on poor Rick, meaning only 2 questions from the public. Don't want to give Occupy people or gay marriage people or Vermin Supreme people get the belligerent Rick Santorum out, and then who knows what'll happen. So that's why there were 2, count them 2 questions from the public. Then sayonara Rick, leave the rest to a script. All in all, I could think of better ways to spend an expensive cab ride, but what the hell? Did I mention how good the kiwi was? I think C-SPAN ran the whole thing live. You probably missed it. So, the trip back, I decided to forego another expensive cab ride to downtown and just hoofed it. And I could back then. Today, the whole trip, soup to nuts, it's all impossible. I can't even fucking walk. How am I going to make a date with the great white somewhere in the hills of fucking New Hampshire? You know what, though, sir? It ain't January 2016 yet, is it, sir? I know. Baby steps, right? First, how long in the asylum? When can I spring this place? No idea? Really? Not even a hint? Springtime, sir. I hate to think I'll pass it here. You only get so many springs, you know. Then they're all gone. Magic again, I'll tell you. Time will get you every time. Where's it go? So anyway, I made my way downhill back to downtown Manchester, the vortex of the New Hampshire primary, arguably. And isn't it just a hop, a skip, and a jump to the vortex of political power in the country? Really, sir, I mean, just for that brief sliver of time between Iowa and New Hampshire, it's the byline. Better than Washington or Moscow, Paris even. Then the next day, back to closed down factories. That's Manchester, after the carriage turns into a pumpkin sometime in January. It was kind of weird, but for the Saturday before primary day, Manchester was kind of dead. It really didn't have the buzz around like, hey, we're going to pick a president, that was much more prevalent in '04 and '08. This time around, it wasn't that Obama didn't have vulnerabilities, but where's the Republican A-team? Just how bad was the field? Millions of people wanted to bring somebody stronger than Romney against Obama, but they couldn't find him, so voted for Romney anyway. Maybe they would have gone with Huntsman if they had heard of him. Other than that, well, really, sir, was there a president in that crowd? It's almost like they gave up. Because Romney, man, that's not who you want to put your chips on. I guess they have to put them on somebody. The Occupy people had taken up camp across from the Radisson, and that was where there was the most activity. The only openly gay Republican candidate was there when I got there. His name is Fred Carver. Interesting guy, Fred Carver. Had serious conservative cred working on presidential campaigns of Bob Dole, John Connolly, and Paul Laxalt, but never ran for any office before running for president. You got to think he knew the odds were stacked against him. So what did he want to accomplish? Well, 4 days before the New Hampshire primary day, he was telling me his grand strategy for getting into the Michigan debate was to duke it out with Rick Perry, get more votes than him. Then if they wanted Rick Perry to debate, they'll have to let Fred Carver debate too. Then, well, his only issue was being a gay Republican, other than being not Romney, but they were all not Romney. I don't know about you, but my crystal ball never figured this was the year to make hay as a gay Republican. And Carver had to know that no matter what bullshit he was saying. So what long game was he playing? One day, being the first openly gay candidate will mean something historical, like Jackie Robinson. But that's regardless of Rick Perry's vote total, because Rick Perry's vote total was not going to be any great shakes anyway. Tonight's debate was going to be his farewell performance, as it turned out. Just a chance to leave without being stuck in memory for eternity as the guy who couldn't count to three. Everybody was going to be at St. Anselm's tonight, either in person or like me with their laptop, or more likely their TV. First, I had to make my way back to Pennacook and reunite with my laptop, so I started to head up Elm toward the bus terminal. Are we ready to march? Are we ready to fucking march? Ron Paul supporters were recruiting marchers, but I didn't get the details because I wasn't ready to march. I wasn't ready to fucking march. It's amazing, though, how many people are ready at any given time, not even knowing what for. You got to do something. Even more amazing, I was one of them not so long ago. I had to get a bus in time to get another bus, then figure out which website was going to have tonight's debate. My laptop was my kind of new toy, and I was still getting used to it. My usual starting off point was Politico. I stayed there for a little while, then just Googled the debate and found where I had to be at debate time. I still had a little while, and the internet made each minute an opportunity to see a different world. I saw an article about Rick Santorum's campaign playing up to racist elements in the Republican Party to pick up votes. I knew that the primary voters, and Santorum's camp in particular had ugly undertones to it. I know there was some outright nastiness between the Santorum camp and Occupy people, but he was always a nice guy to me. That is one of the negative aspects of the festival. You start to believe you know these guys just because you shook their hand. In some ways, I remember that debate like it was yesterday. It was the first debate I ever watched when I felt like, hey man, I've seen the future and this is it. And it ain't so hot. I guess the main reason I thought I was stuck in a dull, anti-utopian future was that it was the first debate I saw online, complete with instant comments from viewers interfering with the flow, creating a flow all its own, which you would think can't help be more interesting than Republicans. But all in all, I'm not so sure you'd be right. I remember all sorts of virtual chuckles when Newt talked about the championship basketball game on Monday night, before he was immediately corrected in the hall. Football, came the immediate correction. I will watch that game with the spherical object, was probably my favorite comment from virtual land, preceded by several LOLs. You got to love failed attempts by Newt to appear like one of the guys. It couldn't happen to a nicer guy as far as I'm concerned. Another first, as far as I can tell, was Chinese being spoken in a presidential debate. Another futuristic moment. Kind of surreal to see the whole ambassador to China say in Chinese, Romney doesn't quite understand this situation. While in general I agree with that sentiment, wouldn't saying it in Chinese just add to the confusion? Probably got more response from Blogland than everything else Huntsman has ever said put together. Not the type of chatter that's likely to get a whole bunch of votes for president in a Republican primary, though. Before you knew it, the debate was over. I kind of noodled around the internet for a bit, amazed at the venomous rudeness that the anonymity of the internet has given us. Any disagreement from the party line, usually on the right, but not always, is for some reason seen as licensed to verbally eviscerate in the crudest, most insulting way. What I found myself wondering was, is anybody sane around here? Huntsman with his Chinese, or the blogger with his venom, Ron Paul's liberty, Gingrich with his ego. Right down the line, is anybody home anywhere in this carnival? Damn, you would think at least you could spot the great white somewhere, but that sneaky bastard kept evading me, lost somewhere in the hills of New Hampshire. Tomorrow, though, is another day. A big day, too, primary Sunday. My sidekick coming in, have a politicking day on the way to a play called Political Suicide. Sunrise was spectacular, then suddenly ominous. Right around sunrise is when I was in the habit of writing Spike's, but the muse is gone, up and left me just in time for the New Hampshire primary. Fucking great whites, man. Fickle species. There was an early debate, just a few miles down the road. I even turned down a chance to volunteer there because of logistics. Besides, watching on the internet was closer to what the event really was designed to be, a TV show. And it was pretty decent theater. You would think they'd gang up on Romney, and they did, kind of. Gingrich seemed to enjoy being the attack dog the most. Seems to fit his personality. Nothing was settled, of course, and who won the debate is always a tricky question, especially since they all were looking to accomplish different things. Huntsman had to hit a grand slam, for instance, and Rick Perry had to hit a 7-run homer, except what he was now doing was just trying to convince America that he's not a complete idiot, and that was a tall order. The next portion of the day consisted of me just looking at different newspapers and websites, figuring out different options to discuss with Nate when he gets here. So basically, I was waiting for Nate, and he was not prompt. As time ticked by, an aggravating number of possible itineraries expired. Sidekicks come with a price. Isn't that part of the deal? Let's face it, the worst part of being one of the three stooges is having to hang with two stooges all the time. On about the 100th time that I looked longingly at the driveway and wished for Nate's car to be there, voila, there it was. And there he was, knocking on the door. "Come on in." "Hey, man," and man hugs were given all around. This was actually kind of an anniversary for us. We met on primary Sunday 4 years ago. Complete strangers, now fast friends. "Sorry I'm late. I tied one on last night. At least that's what they tell me." "No problem." "Okay, sir. I could understand it if you called me a hypocrite on that one, but I was serious. My being pissed off with him not being there went away because, well, he's here now. And isn't that what sidekicks are all about?" "So, do you have an agenda?" he asked. "Several." "Feel like sharing?" "Hey, before we get into it, I have a gift for you." I did, too. I thought Rod had given me this pin that said, "Include me out," but he didn't remember it. At any rate, I was giving it to Nate now. Little did I know that it was going to be such a perfect metaphor for the trip. "Thanks," he said as he put it on. "So what are you looking for?" "John Huntsman's nearby." "That's not what I'm looking for." "So I'll ask again. What are you looking for?" "Trouble. Wherever we're likely to see people getting into each other's shit, that's where I want to be. But first, is it cool to smoke here?" He had this jar of pungent Vermont herb he was itching to share with me. I was not resisting. "It's very cool, believe me. More than cool, even." Nate was filling up a huge glass piece. "I think you're going to like this," he said, lighting up, dragging, and passing it to me, coughing slightly. I filled my lungs with smoke, enjoying the taste, kind of like hash. Very nice. So we smoked for a few minutes, then got down to business. "So John Huntsman isn't even on your radar?" "Not really. More like Santorum, Gingrich. Don't forget your old friend Ron Paul. I'm sure there's a picture of you vigorously waving his sign somewhere on the internet. Hopefully that won't have an adverse effect on your career as a brewer." "Hell no. I think his views on cannabis lends itself nicely to a brewer's view of the world. Yes, Ron Paul is on my radar. But actually, there's one non-confrontational place on my agenda. We're kind of near the Tilton Diner, aren't we?" "Not far." I remembered going there with my dad. Nate's father passed away when Nate was just a kid. Good memories there. "Well, maybe we can get breakfast, lunch. Then there's plenty of time to cut down to Meredith and catch up with your pal Ron Paul." "Sounds good. Let's start heading." So we started to head off to Tilton, another place which was poised to be kind of a weird, iconic spot in the Spike story of January 2012. But that's another story for another time, and I'm not even sure how interesting it is. Seems kind of magical to me now, though. Everything is magic, it seems. White magic before the stroke, black sneaking its way in after. I know my head's playing tricks on me, though. Things didn't seem so great at the time. Sure looks different from the other side of the first ring of hell. Sorry, sir, but that's how I feel. It's at best the lowest ring of purgatory. I was bringing my laptop as the closest thing to high tech that we were going to get. As we were eating breakfast, I checked out Politicos or Real Clear Politics, or somebody else mentioned that it was a year since Gabrielle Giffords was shot. Both of us kind of shrieked away in shock just to remember the horror. Not that I even saw it. I didn't want to. Just hearing it on the radio was bad enough. A year's worth of proof that the gun lobby, now more than ever, owns a lot of Congress, over 70% of the American people. Bad anniversary, man. A bad vibe to have about you as you head to a Ron Paul event in Meredith, by way of Tilton, for chow. You sure you don't want to check out the Huntsman thing? It's a better vibe, I'm telling you. Remember, I'm looking for trouble. What can I say to that? Because, sir, wasn't that a perverse reason why we were all here? If the worst was going to happen anyway, who's got the best shot at the Great White but a reporter located at hell itself? So, on to Ron Paul. And you know what? If we were going to go to hell, the lake region of New Hampshire, you can't get a better view. What's that? Wow. Time's up? So soon. I hope the road to hell isn't as sudden or as direct.